A very warm welcome to you all. Lovely to see you all. That was our vanity shake, by the way. We've aimed to kind of create our own jingle for all of our events. So you'll remember it, so you'll immediately know it's Friends of Europe as a result of that noise. Don't think we've quite got there, but at least it gives you a sense of, a moment to think. My name's Dharmendra Kanani, and I'm Chief Spokesperson and Chief Operating Officer at Friends of Europe, and I have the greatest pleasure to moderate, for me, our first online event. For me, we had one yesterday, but this is our big in conversation with Commissioner Breton, who is here with us, which we'll say a few words about that in a moment. It's very good also to welcome all of you who are online, those of you who couldn't brace the streets or are very far away from all parts of the world. So thank you for joining us. It's a very warm welcome to you. All I'll say before I'm going to invite Joachim Ritter from Vodafone, who's our knowledge partner, to say a few words by way of setting the scene for what we're about to receive. But those of you who aren't here, just for a moment, imagine, it's almost dystopian. Outside of this building, you have hundreds and hundreds of tractors lining the squares and the streets of the area of the Parliament and in front of the Parliament, and I believe animals were hopefully trying to secure access to the Parliament itself. And outside our office, there are two lovely cows. Brought by the young agricultural movement, the young farmers movement. So it's quite an image as we open this year of 2024, where half the world is going to vote. And in January, late January and early February, we have this mass, I suppose, activism from farmers and young farmers, a community that feels left behind, not listened to, and feeling very aggrieved despite the Common Agricultural Policy, which has very much subsidised a lot of farming in the UK, but in the EU. But it's a sign of, I think, the kind of agitation we are likely to witness in the months to come. And this is an early indication of that. And wow, let's see what else, how long they're going to stay. But they really have created this hay out there. They're doing barbecues, singing and horning, etc. So, that's what the scene is out there. But imagine using that as an image of activism across all of Europe from different communities. I think that's what's going to do. But on that note, please can I invite Joachim to the stage and say a few words by way of setting the scene.
I think it's slightly dystopian that you started with the activism, but it actually goes to the heart of what we're faced with right now. And I think we as Europeans need to face up the basic fact in terms of the wounds in our society driven by decades of lost competitiveness, hollowing out middle class, struggles of educational system to catch up, healthcare system that were on their knees during COVID and still grappling with even getting back on their feet, SMEs that are struggling to keep pace with large companies in terms of their productivity. So there are a number of pain points in our society as we look. And the overarching theme for me in all of that is one of Europe needs to get very, very serious around its competitiveness very fast. This, of course, has been triggered also with the war in Ukraine, the illegal invasion by Russia of Ukraine that triggered an energy crisis in Europe. And we have to live with the new normalized price curve for energy. That puts a different cost structure onto our industry, which again drives further deindustrialization in Europe. At the heart of addressing the competitiveness problem in Europe, and this is my first point, is that Europe needs to face up to its long-standing productivity glut. And that leads me to my second point. We don't have that many levers to overcome a productivity glut in Europe. By the way, I live in the UK. They have exactly the same problem. It's falling productivity for a long time, not finding the way of re-energizing the economy. And when you break down productivity, you basically have three categories. You have labor, which is migration, and we can debate whether that's a good solution for Europe post the election. You have capacity utilization or capital utilization, where Europe really tried to sweat the assets to the max, and we've run out of steam on that. And then you have something called total factor productivity. And total factor productivity is how you leverage innovation to leapfrog in how we produce, how we distribute, how we develop our economies. Total factor productivity is actually, there's a time in place where we really leapfrog. That was the ICT revolution in the 1990s. The question we're going to have to ask ourselves as Europeans, are we prepared to unleash the power of the next digital revolution to drive productivity growth in Europe, therefore drive competitiveness? And that leads me therefore to the third point, which is around digitization. Digitization and modern connectivity that drives the digitization of our economies is now one of the most important force multipliers for driving competitiveness. We are, and this is very important to understand, we tend to think about digitization as a linear development. But reality is we are just at the cusp of what we call the industrial internet. Think about 4G when 4G was rolled out as the driver for what was consumer internet. 5G, and particularly 5G standalone, which is a technical term, but it's basically 5G on steroids, super low latency. It enables across the economy completely different use cases that allows industries, small and medium-sized companies, healthcare institutions, education institutions to reimagine how they provide the services compared to how they did it yesterday. So from that point of view, if we embrace the industrial internet, if we in Europe utilize it to our advantage, we have the potential to solve the conundrum that we've been facing for decades, which is about falling productivity. We have run some numbers on that in the case of Vodafone. If all EU member states met the score of 90 in the famous DESI index of the European Commission, that would be equivalent of adding 1 trillion euros to the EU economy. That's equivalent to adding another Netherlands to the total of the European economy. The reality, however, which is my next point, is that we're far from being a leader in this new cusp or this revolution in industrial internet. Europe is falling behind. Europe, unfortunately, has not been able to grasp this opportunity for various reasons. But to give you some hard facts, we are now sitting at around 5% of 5G standalone, 15% of 5G standalone in Europe, compared to, if you look in China, is almost at 100% today. US is getting to 85% of 5G standalone. That then enables all of these use cases to be experimented across all sectors of the economy. So Europe, despite being an advanced economy, is falling significantly behind on one of the most important leapfrog technologies that we have available to ourselves. So our call for action is that we don't have the time to wait around anymore. Unfortunately, we've lost out already in a couple of years. Now we need to double down and catch up with the pioneer nations around the world. It's not only US, China, Korea, the Gulf. Actually, Bangkok is today better performing 5G than the best performing European capital, which is not something we should be proud of. We have 4 EU member states that have poorer 5G than Guatemala. So there's quite a lot that we need to do in this space. So our call for action is one of a complete reset, rethink, and doubling down on driving investment into mobile, modern connectivity and digitization. We are very hopeful with the Commissioner's white paper that are coming out, with Draghi and Letta's reports that we hope will be mobilizing moments for Europe. So without further ado, Commissioner, we look very much forward to hearing your inspirational speech.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Joachim. Much appreciated. Please, Commissioner. So, thank you very much for setting that scene. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to have a bit of a conversation with the Commissioner, and then I want to open it up to all of you. Please don't be passive bystanders. This is an opportunity. This man's really busy. His kind of work portfolio is like heady and dizzy in terms of when you think about how much he's doing, and he's made time to be here after a council meeting as well. So we're really pleased you made the time to be here, really, honestly. The number of people who bet that you wouldn't turn up is crazy. So you've absolutely, if one bet on you arriving, loads of people will be quite wealthy. But we're really pleased you are here. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to cover a number of questions to do with the internal market, to do with digitalization and the elections as well, given that, you know, we have him here. It'll be good to end with some discussion around what he thinks the mandate should do in the future. But to begin with, if I may, you've just come out of a council meeting where, you know, the midterm review of the multi-financial framework, multi-annual financial framework, and clearly you have good news insofar as Ukraine, as I understand it. I don't know, you can let us know. But in terms of where we stand right now, in terms of the internal market, many people will say it's an unfinished business, and it's like painting the kind of, there's a famous bridge in Scotland, you continually paint it, but it's never finished. Many private actors and others will say it's not really a job done. And what is it you say to them in terms of how you make sure the job will be done? Because we have quotes from citizens. We have, so just to let you know, we have a new initiative called 2024 Voices, where we're going to be launching at the end of February a major report where we've done deliberative work with citizens from the 7 top markets in Europe, and who are asking them very specific questions about how they feel about a number of issues, digitalization, internal market, etc. is one of them. One of the questions has been, it doesn't feel like a market because some of the entrepreneurs can't literally easily travel from one another without having to remake themselves. So what do you say to the question of the internal market?
Well, first, thank you very much for having me here, and I'm very happy that you did like me. You walk today to come here, which is good for your health, and I'm very happy that we have been able to make it. Even if you raised some very interesting questions in your preliminary remarks, you too also, even if they were very focused on your business, but it's normal. At the end of the day, I respect it. You know, the internal market is good because it's a never-ending fight. Never-ending fight. I just come back from DC, and sometimes it's good to be in the United States of America because they tell me, wow, you have a strong internal market. We are very happy. You're lucky to have such a strong internal market with now more and more same rules everywhere. It's not the case in the United States. We don't have yet, believe it or not. So, I mean, you're absolutely right in your comments. Mais l'herbe est toujours plus verte ailleurs. So, ça n'empêche pas que l'herbe, il faut la couper en permanence, et surtout les mauvaises herbes. So we know that the job of an internal market commissioner is to make sure that he has the tools, he have also the dedicated forces to do it. And one of the first things I did when I've been tasked in this mission was to see how we could reinforce, let's say, the policy and everything I have to do to make sure that it's working. And now we have the Single Market Emerging Task Force with a dedicated team, finally, to make sure that everything is going well. We have been able to withdraw and to reduce 300 barriers, 300, toutes ces mauvaises herbes. And I learned also during the past crisis that in time of crisis, they come faster than in a normal environment, I should say. I just remember how I had to cope with some countries when we had the problems, the issues with the mask, with the PPE equipment that we were lacking of. How member states started to close their borders to protect their own. So we learn also. So internal market, nothing is perfect. It's again a progress. We need to continue to progress. We learn also from our failures. By the way, I just came from the Parliament because we had just before this meeting a happy closing of the SME, so Single Market Emergency Instrument, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur, that we started before under your presidency. Finally, it's done. Now we reached an agreement a few hours ago. Donc ça va bien, vous voyez, ça se passe bien hein, dans l'ordre. So I'm happy to announce it to you that thanks to this, in case of crisis, we will have finally an instrument, let's say, to make sure that we could anticipate and also force, if I may say so, member states and also companies to react a little bit more in the general interest of Europe.
If I may, this is good news, right? Can you just explain to our audience here and those who are watching, what do you actually mean? What does this specifically change that you've not had before?
Well, that's really, you know, we need to make sure that we understand for, let's say, critical companies and in critical sectors, how they could prepare themselves in terms of crisis, what kind of stocks we have, also how to make sure that they will not, let's say, behave just for the only interest of one single country. So we have many tools now, including with fines, because again, we need also to make sure that if you're lucky enough to benefit from the biggest market of the world, of the free world. I keep telling this also to my US friends. We are the biggest, but we're also the biggest digital market of the free world, with 450 million, unfortunately not anymore 500, but you're welcome to be back, by the way. But we feel sorry for that. Ice balls times 2, so we are the biggest market. And of course, it gives a fantastic opportunity, but also some, let's say, obligations to follow. And this is a good introduction also for what we did. Internal market is not only goods, people, product, it is also digital now.
Yes.
And one of the biggest problem we had, I believe, coming also from the telco industry myself, it was part of my life, long time before, but I know this market pretty well. And it is, of course, a totally fragmented market. 27 countries, 27 regulations, 27 obligations, not the same. And it's true that our digital market was totally fragmented, which was not the case in the US, which was not the case in China. And then, yes, it's fair to say that we missed the personal data revolution. Personal data means how to use personal data to build this so-called GAFA. And to tell you the truth, of course, I admire the success of companies, but it was not rocket science to start. You could be a one-year college student and then start with a smart ID, what could be 15 years later, a giant. But because it was a totally integrated digital market. And finally, we have it now in Europe. Thanks to the, I don't say regulation, the organization, how we now organize ourselves. One regulation for everything, one rule for everything, same for everyone. DSA, DMA, Data Act, DGA, and now AI Act. Together with the ambassador here, we spent 38 hours together. It was wonderful. 2 nights with the ambassador.
Really are
2 nights with the ambassador. This is something you will never forget. And by the way, tomorrow there is a very important meeting at the Coreper, just to validate what we finally agreed between the Council, and you were here to represent the Council with Carme, and with the Parliament. We find an agreement finally. It will be voted tomorrow with the Coreper. We had a lot of interaction to finalize, and I think in a very good spirit. So of course I don't want to interfere, but I have good hope and feelings that what we have done will reach a global agreement at unanimity from all member states. And then, of course, it will be the case of the Parliament. And with all these regulations, and of course, everyone is playing his role, and we respect this, including countries. We had a lot of very positive interaction with France, with Germany. They played a very, very important role and positive. Very important also discussion with everyone, of course, but also with the groups in the Parliament. And at the end of the day, this is what I said 2 days ago at the TTC in DC, including to my good friend, the Secretary of State, who was here, Tommy Biden. I said, look, we are here in the process where our democracy has spoken. And it's true that at the end of the day, as the biggest one, and we are the biggest in digital, but we have the obligations to follow what is important and good for our companies and fellow citizens. And it is 100% pro-innovation. I'm coming from the business myself, and I know that's what is important. Of course, it's not to be over-regulated, but it's to have clear rules. Very simple and clear rules, legible, and something that is now established. You know what you can do, you know what you cannot do. This is Europe. And in addition, it is extremely important for innovation, which is also something important for the internal market, and especially if we speak of AI, because we propose at the same time for all the startups, or companies, or engineers, or whoever, would like to start to establish themselves in Europe. We will offer, thanks to our very large Euro HPC network, which is the largest on the planet, offering the biggest capacity of computing power, which is, as we know, what you need if you want to develop new AI model, data set and data, how to organize and to have clear rules of who and which data is done in Europe. Come, you will not have the fear to be sued. No class actions, it's clear. Come also, because you need also computing power, we'll give it, including for free, for the one who have with very, very good idea. You will not be, not need to be directly or indirectly linked to any kind of very big GAFA to provide you behind the scene or openly the computing power that you need. In Europe, it will be clear. We will have, by the way, the two over the three biggest computers on the planet, exascale, 2 will be in Europe, dedicated for these applications, offering, by the way, if you have some young talents here, welcome. And of course, we have also, I believe, which is extremely important, the academic capacities, engineers, PhDs, a lot are coming from Europe. It's true that a lot are going outside of Europe. It is very true. With everything we do, I really think that this will be the place to come and to invest in terms of AI development.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is all exciting news. Let's hope that it bodes well for the work of the new commission and the new mandate, and the fact that it doesn't close in on itself, given the political structure or the political colour of who happens to come into power later this year. But this is all great stuff. But let me quote someone from Poland. Her name is Cornelia, and she's an entrepreneur. This part of our 2024 Voices deliberative watch is one of the most important economic challenges is adapting to the business environment and constantly innovating. We find it really hard, and we don't have the help to ensure that we are able to stay in industry and up to speed. You're bringing out a white paper on, the Digital Networks Act. What will change for her?
Well, we still have a nice projecting ourselves maybe for the next 5 years ahead of us. We still have things to do. Yes, it's true that we need to discuss of our infrastructure in terms of digital, but it's true also that we are lacking of a global and coherent, let's say, financial market. And it's true that it is still too fragmented. So let's speak first of, for the financial market, this is really something that we are lacking behind in Europe, and we need to have a much more integrated one. This is now obvious, and I really hope that it will be high on the agenda for the next commission. Because, of course, we have the engineers, we have the technological capacities, we have all the support, we have a very clear rules. But it's true that when you're a startup, it's not always easy to find the right financing solutions. And this is something that, personally, I think we need to put very high on the next agenda of the Commission. This is really the thing which will allow us to boost all these innovations that I see here in Europe, everywhere, including, of course, in Poland. But in order to achieve our ambition now, as I said, we have a digital now internal market, but in order to make this, let's say, up to date and really at the state of the art, we need now to have the right infrastructure. And it's true that we don't have yet the right infrastructure to support our goal and our ambition. But of course, I'm an engineer by training and by former jobs, but I'm a politician. So I work now as a politician, and who give me, let's say, the direction that I have to follow? The co-legislators. And what did they request? It's very clear now. It is in the digital decade. It has been voted by the Parliament, it has been voted by the Council, and now it is our democratic ambition. It's not Thierry Breton's willingness.
Sure.
It's not Ursula von der Leyen hope. It is now mandatory, because it is what our democracy has requested. Now, as a commissioner, I'm in charge to apply it, to make it workable.
But it will depend on council members actually saying one thing here, but defending their own sovereignty back home.
That's something else. I mean, when you're in Washington, D.C., I mean, you hear something when you're the governor of Delaware or Georgia or whatever, you say something else. Bienvenue dans le monde des continents démocratiques. Welcome in the world of democratic continent. We are a democratic continent, and it's true that yes, we have some states where you have your own view and your constituency, and you go to DC or to Brussels. By the way, DC and Brussels are exactly the same thing. Same number of journalists, same number of think tanks, same number of lobbyists, which is fine. 1,300 lobbyists, 1,200 journalists, a little bit more lobbyists than journalists, and a significant amount of think tank.
Sure.
But that's welcome again in a democratic continent.
Okay.
So my point here now for what we could expect from what we call the DNA, Digital Network Act. This is what we are working on. And you mentioned it, it's the white paper. So we said, look, for the digital decade, we need to have this kind of connectivity. We have a lot of KPIs. But of course, what should be the infrastructure that we need to develop in Europe to make this happen? And this is where I launch a very broad and large consultation, like in everything I'm doing, before the DSA, the DMA, the Data Act, or even the AI Act. We launch a very large consultation. I think you could say that Vodafone was a part of it, of course, like some of your peers and friends, competitors, but member states, but customers, customer associations, unions, academic, everyone who wanted to say something had a chance to say. What was the question? What is the vision? What is your vision of what should be the network of tomorrow in order to support the digital space? Should it still be based on cable or on 5G only? Or should we think also on beyond 5G? So should we think of software as a network application? Or what will you carry on your network? Should it be data? Should it be APIs? How will you use edge computers embedded into your networks? So we ask all these questions. And now we are building a global vision. This is what this is my dream. My dream is to be able to have a global vision that we all share, at least. This is what probably within the next 10 years, what we believe should be a network for a continent, where for us what is important is cooperation and solidarity and not leaving anyone behind. That's our values in Europe. And especially it's important when you are in charge of, again, a continent made of 27 countries with their own history. So I hope that we are now in the process to finalize. Now we have a pretty good vision.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the next question is, behind this vision, okay, we are here, by the way, with a regulation which is mainly based on almost 25 years ago now, almost, when incumbent, and I was an incumbent, so we inherited from very large copper networks, and we have been obliged, pushed, it was good, to open our networks in order to encourage competition. But the regulation is still mainly based on that. Who is still using the copper network? Are you? Are you using copper networks in your business? Okay, it's not available anymore. They do other things with copper, including for the clean tech industry. But still, my point here is that, yes, we will be very open. Like in any regulation that we have put for the chips, for the clean tech, we need to have exactly the same thing now with vision. For the chips, it was easy. The vision was also the same kind of things. By 2030, we want to be able to produce in Europe at least 20% of the global consumption in semiconductor, by the way, both in legacy semiconductors, but also cutting edge. And of course, enhance our research. One pillar for research, one pillar for financing, one pillar for regulation if we need to adapt it. So this is exactly what we are working on. Sure. Of course, I know that the time is the time. We have elections in between.
Exactly.
But I really think it's extremely important to start to do this. And we could not do it before because we wanted to have first the view and objectives from our co-legislators, then to finalize all our landscape, regulatory landscape, which give us now the capacity to have finally a global integrated digital market. Third point, infrastructure. This is where we are. And I hope that we will be able to have a very, very strong paper, and that, of course, it will be, let's say, the first pillar of what we will need to do for the next 5 years.
Next 5 years, yeah. Indeed. And vision on paper is absolutely fantastic, but you know better than anybody else, given that you've come from the private sector into the Commission, you realise that it's like herding cats to get operational things done, because you're 27 markets, and actually having that vision is great, But getting things done in the way that we did during COVID is amazing what we did in COVID, because adversity drove our passion to cut across borders and do things. But one of the biggest challenges will be implementation. How do you get into a commission that's implementation focused? But I'm not going to ask you that question because I'm conscious of the time. I want you to talk about your vision for peace. You just spoke about a vision for digitalization and making sure no one's left behind and having a real strong continent, but connected and interdependent with the rest of the world. You're the one who's also responsible for some of our defense budgets. And you've made a very bold statement that we should move to 100 billion because you think it's absolutely the right thing to do. Unpack that for us, would you please? In the context of the fact that Ukraine still doesn't have what it was promised, and it won't have by the April this year, in terms of the full set of armaments that it needs right now. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, if that's not the right thing, but I think you made a number of statements which caught the imagination of the press when you spoke about what was reported by Trump, and it's made everyone think about, as we think about that horrible outcome that might happen if he does come back to power, we'll need to do things very differently and learn from the past.
Welcome in Europe. And welcome again in being a politician. Of course, I stay in my position. But my role is to, especially in the capacity of all the, let's say, the files that I have to run, is to express a vision. And then, of course, that's the job of politicians, to make sure that this vision, this ambition, could be shared by our co-legislators. Who are again our co-legislators? The Parliament and I prefer to call it our European Senate. Because the Council is the European Senate. Of course, we have 27, we are not, but that's exactly, again, let's say, the chamber representing our states. But of course, you need to be able to articulate a vision. And if you look at everything I did since I'm a commissioner, and when we had the COVID-19 crisis, so as you know, I've been tasked to take care of the industrial part of the vaccine.
Indeed.
And it was quite a mission, believe me. Well, but then I thought, after touring in Europe, you remember, Lucia, you were here also with the team, touring in Europe in every single factory. I said, look, I believe that, yes, if we work well, we have the capacity to get herd immunity by July 15, I didn't say 14, I say 15, 2020. When I said that, it was in March. So they told me, Commissioner, you're crazy. You're crazy. You give such an ambition. But you know what happens then? When I was touring it, visiting all the head of states, okay, Commissioner, what can we do to help? When I saw companies, Commissioner, wow, you're ambitious, but okay, I'm AstraZeneca, I'm BioNTech, I'm Johnson & Johnson, I am whoever. Okay, now what can I do to help? And you know what? By July 1st.
Sure, people stood up.
It's done.
Absolutely, yeah.
But then when we thought with Paolo Gentiloni, my good friend in charge of economy, we said, wow, after blocking all Europe, now of course we need to support our industries and workforce. But in order to avoid to have discrepancies in the internal market and to have only and to maintain a level playing field, we should probably propose a global way to support it with global loans and this is, it has been, and we wrote an op-ed. Everyone was against us. And then finally, it moves.
Sure.
Then when we said, look, I think we need a satellite. We need now a new constellation of satellites. It's not in budget, but in order to make sure that we will be able to provide what is necessary when we see what happened in Europe, and especially in Ukraine, said, okay, it's crazy, but at the end, it's done. So now again, this is a job, this is a mission of a politician.
So the 100
But of course,
let's talk about that though.
But of course, now in defense.
Yes.
Of course, and you're absolutely right. In defense, we have now, I believe, a very urgent need to make sure that we will increase our, let's say, defense production capacity to cope with the situation. We are lucky enough in Europe to be able to do everything in defense, but not at the right time. Not at the right time. So defense readiness is really let's say, the change of paradigm that we need to implement
Absolutely.
within all our defense industry. So we started with ammunitions. So you ask myself, I will say a few words on it now, and then I will tell you what we have in mind with the 100 billion. Defense with ammunitions, here also, we took a commitment that it was very important to make sure that we can enhance our defense industry dedicated to ammunition, mainly 155 artillery ammunitions, to be able to provide what is necessary to Ukraine. Myself, in my capacity, I'm not able to deliver to Ukraine, but I'm able, that's my job, to make sure that the defense industry will enhance its capacity to produce this. So I said last March, in a year from now, I take the commitment, here again, to increase our capacity of production to 1 million. Of course, then member states said, from our side, we want to make sure that we'll be able to provide to Ukraine 1 million shells. But that's their mission, because they have the money and they have the one to pass order. My mission is to make sure that the industry will be able to support this ambition. And guess what? Here again, I started to tour again, everywhere in Europe, 12 countries, 70 factories, one by one, discussing with them. We increased in 10 months for more than 40%, in fact closer to 50%, the capacity of production of Europe. I ask and I propose a new regulation, ASAP, in order to finance this manufacturing, and we got the authorization for our co-legislator, you remember that. And then we are now, and I announced yesterday, because we had a big defense ministry meeting, that we are 2 months ahead schedule, because now we have increased our capacity of production up to 1 million in Europe now as I speak. So then we will continue to increase it, because now we will have the benefit from ASAP. So our target will be between 1.4 to 1.5 million at the end of this year and 2 million next year. In other words, we almost increased in 10 months by 50% of capacity. We want to double it again now, without ASAP. Now, thanks to ASAP, again, between now and 2025, and I'm absolutely convinced that we will be able to make it. Now, of course, member states have to pass orders to the industry. Yeah. The industry has to we have to make sure that the industry, which is providing all this capacity, will provide at least for the months to come in priority to Ukraine and not outside of Europe, because of course there is also some customers still buying, quote unquote, buying these ammunitions. So, but that's not in my hand. So we delivered our mission, and we will continue to do this. Now we are working on a strategy at large based on what we learn for ammunitions for all the defense industry. And I will present this on February 27. Here also, based on the same things, which is rules, regulations, financing, adaptations, R&D. So we will have these 3 pillars, let's say, framework, but it is for all the industry or defense industry to make sure that we help this industry to change their way of working and the paradigm. Before, it was probably in the dividend of peace era, we were used to have this industry working with only one customer, the member states, at their own price and their own speed. But now we have a war. We have a war in Europe at our door, and we know also that all the 24 member states who are members of NATO, we all committed to move our defense up, our defense, the defense of defense by 2% of GDP, which means that it will be an additional 140 billion euros that we'll spend per year.
Sure.
So it means that we need, of course, to increase this.
Okay.
So then, how to do? So we made calculations with my teams, and we have 2 pillars that we believe, and it was, and I made this comment, by the way, in my political family at Renew, some of you were probably here, and I said, well, that's my personal vision. This is like everything else. I express this vision. Based on what I see, we should probably work on 2 pillars. One should be to continue to support Ukraine and to make sure that we send a strong signal to support Ukraine. By doing this, continue to improve our defense industry, not only in ammunition, but everywhere. That's a 50 billion package, more or less. And we can, of course, explain how we got to these figures. And the second pillar is that we have now in defense, finally, a strategic compass. In other words, that's our white book of defense, where we all align the 27. It has been done by my friend, the HRVP, Josep Borrell. It's done now. And in this strategic compass, we decided that we have 4 contested spaces where we need to work together and to build infrastructure to protect Europe in these contested spaces, which are what? Space, cyber, air, and maritime. And here we said that we need to build infrastructure together. I spoke about Iris Square for space. We will have a cyber dome for cyber security, and so on. And we believe this is another additional 50 billion. If, of course, finally, there is a willingness to work on this, that I'm sure, like for everything we have done since the past few years in terms of managing crisis, we will be able to find the money, including with different tools. So we have the different tools.
Sure.
But the first thing, of course, is to create a willingness, a political willingness, shared by not only the 27, never forget, our co-legislators.
Absolutely. I need to pause you because I know that you need to go, because this gentleman has to leave because of the tractors outside. We want to make sure he doesn't miss his train. So we've got our time is curtailed. So I want to give you the opportunity to ask a few questions. But on the point you've just made, I think it's great what you're saying, and it's clear that you have the vision, but you've got a can-do approach. You're more interventionist than perhaps other commissioners, and you've made things happen. The issue is that what we've learned with Ukraine is that we were the least prepared, least crisis ready, and all the statements that were made in the past 7 years about interoperability and joint commissioning haven't actually happened for toffee. And I hope that this can change in the next 5 years. I'm going to ask you to answer that question. I'm just parking that, and you can come back to that. Questions, colleagues? You have so lady here, gentleman there, and I'll take one more. And there. Sorry, I'll see what time I've got.
Thank you.
Introduce yourself, please, and
Yes.
make it really brief.
Yeah, I'm Sara Baldi from the group Crédit Agricole, so thank you very much for your remarks. I wanted to go back to the initial affirmation regarding how Europe is lagging behind when it comes to digitalization, and say that this unfortunately applies to various other sectors. And we had a similar discussion this morning with your colleague Commissioner McGuinness on Europe competitiveness. So I wanted to ask you, overall, where area do you see as priority when it comes to boost Europe competitiveness, and also link it to the strategic autonomy?
Okay, we'll just focus on the priority for the moment, if it's okay. The gentleman who's just here, he had his hand up. There, great.
Yeah, hello.
Do you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Pierre-Emmanuel Noël from European Investment Bank, seconded to the Belgian presidency with Thomas Dermin, friend of yours. Mr. Commissioner, I really like what you said about you create the legal framework, then investment need to happen, the industry has to follow. What, in this context, do you make of the notion of strategic investments? We have the RRF until 2026. Digitalization is one of the two twin transitions. Do you see any convergence between your policy, the industrial policy, and this notion of strategic investments? What needs to be done? Where are the convergences between these two policies?
What's in your mind? What would you like
to see happen? There was this paper from Bruegel that was released recently about European strategic investments. So the idea is, what do we do beyond
No,
the
but I'm asking
RRF?
you as EIB, what do you want to see happen? What do you want to say to the Commissioner? What would you like him to do in terms of investment?
Well, we
You are the
think that
EIB.
the two maybe should go together, hand in hand, because the legal framework, creating the legal conditions, and then making sure that Europe also keeps a strategic vision of digitalization, climate, etc., keeps on the same momentum that we had with RRF post-COVID.
Okay, all right, great. Gentleman here. Just introduce yourself and very brief.
Darren Ennis, Head of EU Affairs at Vodafone. Obviously, we're very excited about the Digital Networks Act, but picking up on your point around the vaccine, the DNA, I think, for our sector is sort of like the vaccine or the cure, but we're kind of wondering in between, in the current mandate, what are the things that you think the current Commission can do to sort of keep us on life support till the vaccine comes along? And finally, just I will add an extra one building on the original point. How important is the Letta and Draghi reports with regards to helping your
Okay.
mission for the
Okay.
next mandate.
Thank you very much. Should we start there? How
Yeah,
important are
okay,
these
so
tools?
no, I'm glad, that, in Italy, I love the country, it's a fantastic country. They have so many former prime ministers, that's amazing. and we are very happy to keep them busy because so that's, and by the way, they're fantastic, they're a friend of mine, because and so that's why, but two is good.
You know that's gonna go viral
two is
everywhere.
good. And by the way, we are interacting a lot with Mario and a lot also with Enrique. And we are sure that they will have fantastic report, and it will be even better if we could use it also to help me to create this political momentum, as I say.
Indeed.
So that's also
Indeed.
a two-way to approach. But of course, and by the way, for the DNA, I know the DNA is absolutely mandatory for the social sector. Don't misunderstand. I know exactly the situation you are in. If somebody knows, it's me, for many reasons that you obvious. So I will do everything, not only, of course, for telco. I will do this, of course, for all the industry. The industry at large, to support, and especially infrastructure at large, is really needed to make sure that we will not lagging behind. I could come back with the first comment. Okay, I hear that we are late. I hear that, but I don't agree. Okay, in some areas it's good because then it's a good push for us, but it's not true for everything. But okay, I hear what you said, but I think that having been able to put 750 billion euros on the table, saying that 37 of this amount will be dedicated to accelerate digital transition. Sorry, but it's not nothing. I mean, and by the way, it's more than that. It was in our plan, but it's over 40% of this amount that are now used to catch up, if you want, and to it's not enough. But be careful that we have this still envelope. They are still available. Let's make sure that in countries where you operate, you could still interact to make sure that it could help you in this transition mode. But of course, the DNA, we need, again, to accelerate. We will not lose time, because everything that we have done is done, and I'm absolutely certain that it will be a very important file for the next Commission. And believe me, I don't know who will be in charge, but I know that in some will continue to be in charge, or will be in charge. I can see with the track record of what we have done that we can do things pretty quickly, even in our, let's say, democratic environment that we have, of course, to respect. Strategic investment, strategic, you said strategic vision and EIB. By the way, I'm very glad that we have somebody from EIB here, because I just remind you that the EIB, I was happy that I saw, by the way, I saw your new boss yesterday, Nadia. EIB is here to support European policies. And I say policies, all the policies. Energy is part of the policy.
Indeed.
Defense now is part of the policy. So I expect EIB to adapt its rule to make sure that EIB will follow our strategic vision, which are important for our strategy. What is more important these days than our defense? Isn't it strategic? It is mandatory. So I really hope that EIB will finally change a little bit its rules to make sure that they will support our defense industry. And I think it's absolutely mandatory, because we are lacking already of financing to support the defense industry. So EIB should be the one to send the signal that we need to make sure that we will increase our capacity to have finally a defense industry integrated to defense Europe.
Great.
But then, of course, with all this being said, we have our economic strategy. It's clear we need also to have a dedicated fund, but it's not always easy to have a dedicated fund and you know this. I wanted, by the way, to have this in defense, and we're not able to do it. But I will continue. And I'm very happy that now, hopefully, we will have the 27 board members of the EIB being vocal to make sure that we will.
But you've clearly opened up a can of worms there, and I wonder how the wires will be inside the EIB tonight in terms of what he's just said. But hey, that's what's good about us here, that you've had the opportunity to share your thinking, and I imagine there will be ramifications of what you've just said in terms of the policy choices and the investment choices the EIB will make, because there's very, very vocal and very progressive message you've made there to some and others not. Finally, you need to go. All I want you to say is, what's your message to the people outside that are tractors everywhere, young and old, and those who are likely to become even more active in the months to come? What's your message to them as a commissioner and who's like on the cusp of change and elections coming up in June?
Well, first, I am the commissioner of many things, but not on agriculture. So
But you're one Team Europe.
So I'm very humble. But I think that at large, one of the key messages that we need to carry to all our fellow citizens and all sectors, that of course we are engaging into a very large transformation of our continent, both digital and green, with the Green Deal. And of course, our mission, again, collectively, is to make sure that we embark everyone into this transition at the right speed, not leaving anyone behind. And this is, I think, a very strong message for everybody. And everyone will be an actor in this transition, but we will be here and to listen to what they have to say, to take this in consideration. And by the way, in my portfolio, this is what I did with the automotive industry, which is also engaged in a huge transition with millions of workers. And I created the so-called Route 35 with a rendezvous point in 2026 to make sure that everything that we have to do is done without leaving anybody behind and to take the right decision. So that's basically what I believe we should do now. Of course, execution is extremely important, and that, of course, it will be another important task for the next Commission.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And, let's hope the spirit, imagination, and the execution ability last in the next Commission, because from our point of view, there's been so many regulations. Actually, the next Commission has to be an implementation Commission. Ladies and gentlemen, Thierry Breton, thank you for being with us. Really good. Thank you. Thank you.